Once upon a time, there was a little boy called Nils. He was very unkind to animals and people, and as punishment, he was transformed into a small elf and ended up flying with some geese all across Sweden, from south to north. This is the boy you can see on the back of the goose here. The story, The Wonderful Adventures of Nils Holgersson, is actually a school book, written by Nobel Prize winner Selma Lagerlöf at the beginning of the 20th century, and he seems to have been deemed famous enough or important enough to end up on one of the Swedish banknotes, which is the image you can see here. The school book was of course written to teach geography, but it was also a story, what we could call a narrative about the country. Before we go on, let's pause for a moment and consider what is actually a country. It usually has a name, right? But what does that name stand for? Its borders, the geography, the landscape, people, language or languages, history, or its culture? Well, it's all of those really. A country, or our understanding of what a country is, can be said to be all these things: geography, landscape, language, and culture. How these can combine to shape the identity of a particular country is what we are going to look at a little here today. I'm Annika Lindskog, lecturer in Swedish at UCL, and I'm going to take you through some of the reasons for why I think Swedes have ended up being such nature lovers, and why they sometimes see nature as something important not just for themselves, but also on a communal or collective level. This portrait here, from the UCL Art Museum Collections, is of a man called Carl von Linné, or Carl Linnaeus in the Latinized version. You might have come across his name in other contexts, as he is regarded as the father of taxonomy, that is, the naming of plants, and hugely important for the botanical discipline. When he was 25, so a bit younger than he is here, he rode out from Uppsala near Stockholm in Sweden to go and discover Lapland, here referring to the northernmost parts of the Scandinavian peninsula. This was in 1732, and Linnaeus was at this point still a student at Uppsala University, a young botanist who wanted to start making a name for himself. So why is this relevant here? Why might he not ride to Lapland and collect some flowers hitherto uncatalogued? Well, it's just that collecting some plants is not all he did, nor all the people paying for his journey, which was the Science Academy of Sweden, wanted him to do. No, they wanted him to A, discover lots of natural treasures Sweden could be proud of, B, discover lots of natural resources Sweden could exploit and become rich from, and C, document as much as possible of the life of the Sami people as a kind of curiosity, and so that Sweden could be proud of them too. This was, as said, in the 18th century. Science had started to become incredibly important then, in order to understand the world better, but also to utilize it better. All the explorative voyages from Western powers to distant shores were to possibly claim new territories, make new scientific discoveries, and to find ways to make more money from trade. Sweden thought it might do something similar in Lapland. So off Linnaeus went. To document it all, he wrote down what he'd encountered in a diary. It's a great read. He's totally indiscriminate and jots things down more or less just as they occur to him, or rather as they appear before him, mixing Swedish, Latin and his childhood dialect, often remarking on things in a kind of wondrous amazement. Here are some examples. Linnaeus never published his diary, and the original version is actually in a vault here in London, Piccadilly, where we sometimes go and look at it. So it got published and translated later. But Linnaeus still spread his stories of what he had seen and experienced in Lapland in other ways, often quite subjectively. Here is, for example, a book called Flora Laponica, an account of some of the plants Linnaeus had found on his journey. But at the start of the book is this picture. If you look at it, you can see that it depicts Linnaeus sitting comfortably in a rather majestic and exotic-looking mountainous landscape. This is a good example of Linnaeus's rhetorical way to present the region. The mountains are quite a lot higher and peakier than in reality, and so are the trees. Much of this area is actually above the so-called tree line and only have knee-high growth. And the reindeer look rather intelligent and far more elegant than the ones you normally encounter in real Lapland. Linnaeus himself is sitting comfortably in the middle of this landscape, in Sami costume and with one of their magical drums. But the Sami's own tradition, Linnaeus should not have been allowed near any of these objects. But here Linnaeus presents himself as a rightful part of this landscape, as if it is his, looking very much at home, and in this way asserting his authority over it. This is a landscape that is now owned by Linnaeus, and his way of presenting it to others will influence how they think of it. And although this is all a while ago now, the attitudes and rhetoric Linnaeus had have been quite influential. You see, for a while Sweden had held a bit of political power across various parts of Europe. It counted Finland as a territory for a long time and parts of the Baltic coast, as well as Norway. But various military defeats and political circumstances saw that power steadily diminish from 1718 onwards. And in 1905, the last blow to this northern superpower came when the Norwegians decided that they too would rather look after themselves, thank you very much, and Sweden had to let them go. For this now somewhat decimated country, the nature and landscape of what it did have left now became more important and something to build renewed national pride around. So this is where the school book comes in, written precisely around the years Norway separated from Sweden. It does not just impart geographical details of the country though, it also tells the readers how great it is through the experiences Nils has of it and through the statements of others he meets. And one of the reasons it is great is because of its vast and diverse nature, just as Linnaeus had tried to tell everyone earlier. And just like with Linnaeus, the North gets a particular write-up here too. Linnaeus himself also gets a rediscovery at this time, and his travel journals, including the Lapland one, is republished in new editions. And a whole host of other activities take place on national level to encourage Swedes to be proud of the country they have left and to build that pride, at least partially, on its nature. Things like a tourist organization encouraging the citizens to go out and to know their country, their slogan that we can see on the stamp here. Or national parks, areas of landscape, often wild landscapes, which are given protective status to preserve them. Or the open-air museum Skansen in Stockholm, containing representative houses and animals from the whole country, so that the city dwellers too could see and experience its diversity. All of that come from this time, as does the famous right to roam, which underlines that this is for everyone. Allemansrätten in Swedish means that anyone can go anywhere and have access to the entire country. And it is the legacy of this campaign, if we can call it that, which is still around today. It is embedded in a kind of sense for nature, an awareness that it is there, and a general idea that is close to us and represents something good. You can see it in some famous brand names. The furniture and home goods giant IKEA is keen on light and open spaces and natural materials. Food companies use close links to nature as a unique selling point, like the dairy producer Arla here. And the now very popular Fjällräven brand was once started to develop equipment for sustained outdoor activities, even if their rucksacks now get a lot of use also in urban spaces. And sometimes this comes through in the language used about a country as well. A few years ago, one of the main newspapers did a survey on what words people thought of when they thought of Sweden. The list ran something like this. And as you can see, they all relate to the natural geography of the country and how it feels to be in it. Then they asked the Swedes what their favourite words were, and here are some of the top scoring ones. Can you guess the meaning of any of these? Yes, sommarvind is indeed summer wind. And if you know some German, you might spot the next one too. It is sky blue. Himmel is sky, as in Norwegian as well, and blå, the colour blue. We can see also from this that Swedish is quite good at forming new words by putting several of them together. So far we've had 2, but now we actually have 3. Soluppgång means sunrise, where sol is sun, upp is up, and gå is go or rise here, with the ng added to make it a noun. Another place where we can see nature focus embedded is in common family names. Not everyone is named after a landscape feature, but quite a few. Look at, for example, Freddie Ljungberg, quite a successful footballer. Ljung actually means heather, and Berg mountain, so he is really Freddie Heather Mountain. Or Ingmar Stenmark, once one of the best downhill skiers in the world. His name means stone and ground, so stone ground. Or Sara Sjöström, a currently competing and successful Olympic swimmer, whose name actually means lake stream. From sjö for lake and ström, quite a common second part, meaning stream or a small river. Let's see if we can spot some more nature names in other Swedes you might have heard of. How about the tennis ace and underwear designer Björn Borg? Well, it's a little bit of a false friend, as Borg means fortress or berg, and it's different from berg, which we had earlier. But Björn, his first name, does actually mean bear. Or what about the children's author Astrid Lindgren, whose most famous figure Pippi you might have come across? Yes, this is definitely a nature name. Lind is a tree, the linden or lime tree in English, and gren means branch. So the whole name is linden tree branch. What about the millennium author Stieg Larsson then? Ah, no, there is no nature here. But it's still a very common family name type. It means Lars' son, as you might have guessed. And quite a few Swedes have names that mean someone's son. How about Greta then? Yes, there is definitely nature here too. You recognize berg now for mountain. Tun has no good direct translation though, but it is actually the same root as still survives in some English place names, as in Hampton or Southampton. It means broadly a place where you dwell or a homestead. So Greta's name could perhaps be translating as dwelling on the mountain. And lastly, what about Zlatan? No, this is of course not Swedish nature. This is of Yugoslav origin. But Zlatan is a very good representation of names from other cultural heritage, which are now also very common in Sweden. Zlatan apparently means gold, or golden by the way in Serbo-Croat, not entirely inappropriate for one of the highest earning footballers in the world. Anyway, now you perhaps know a little more about why nature features quite large in some parts of the Swedish imagination. Linnaeus was important enough to end up on a banknote too, and got the 100 krona one. 100 in Swedish, by the way, is 100, so not all that different from English. In fact, numbers often look quite similar across languages, so if you want to learn some easy Swedish, perhaps start with 1 to 10. How we define our countries are then a mixture of many things. We can perhaps say that how we understand them and the landscapes is a mixture between what we have learned or heard from others and our own interpretation of them. And these interpretations are not necessarily fixed or possible to see in just one way. as the quote here from Neil Oliver, a British nature presenter, highlights. Linnaeus himself was quite certain that it was for him to tell others what the landscape was, as we can see from this first quote here, which he may or may not have said, but which is regularly attributed to him. Res ipsas noce is his own motto though, and underlines that he thought that only by naming things can we truly know what they are. I leave you with a picture of a flower that Linnaeus named after his mentor, Olof Rudbeck, and which is common here in Britain as well. Perhaps look out for it. And one last word from that list of favourite Swedish words, smultron. It means wild strawberries and is a favourite summer word, as it conjures up being outdoors, in nature, eating its wild berries, and being generally content and at ease with the world. Swedes sometimes talk about their own smultronställe, wild strawberry patch, a metaphor for a place where they are particularly fond of, be it in nature, a favourite cafe, or anywhere else they feel particularly happy and at ease. Perhaps you have one of those places too. On the next slide are a few places you might go if you want to think further about any of the topics here. Thanks for listening to the end, and enjoy your own summer, wherever it is.